the old rancher had lived long enough to know that the wild never gave back what it took. Not a horse, not a calf, not a moment, not a memory. Once something disappeared into the vast stretches of the Montana grasslands, it was as good as gone forever. That was why, on that cold autumn morning 8 years ago, when his beloved mare Willow did not return, he felt something inside him fracture, not with the sharpness of anger or the heaviness of grief, but with the slow, hollow ache of acceptance. Horses wander. Predators hunt. Storms rise without warning. Life on a ranch demands resilience, and resilience sometimes means learning to live with unanswered questions. But Willow was different. She wasn't just another horse in the stables. The rancher had raised her from the moment she could barely stand, bottle-feeding her after her mother died during birth. She grew under his watchful eye, from a trembling orphan foal into a breathtaking silver-coated mare with an intelligence that often startled visitors. Willow didn't just respond to commands, she understood them. She didn't just follow the rancher, she sought him, sensed him, trusted him in ways that made their bond feel more like companionship than ownership. The morning she vanished, the rancher had gone out to check the fence line along the northern ridge. A storm had rolled in the night before, tearing branches and scattering debris. Willow had been grazing near the slope where the soil was soft. One misstep, one spooked movement, one unexpected noise, he never found out what caused it. But he found tracks leading toward the forest, a broken section of the fence, and then, nothing. No blood, no further prints, no sign of struggle. Just silence. And silence, he knew, was the wild's way of keeping secrets. The sheriff sent a team. Neighbors rode out for days. But the forest was thick, the terrain unforgiving, and winter approached fast. Eventually, one by one, even the most hopeful cowboys shook their heads. "Tom," they told him gently, "sometimes they just don't come back." The rancher nodded, even thanked them, but in his chest a quiet truth burned: Willow wouldn't leave him. Not willingly. Something had happened, but what, he would never know. Years passed in slow, heavy cycles. Seasons came and went. The rancher aged. His hands, once strong, grew stiff with arthritis, his back curved from decades of labor. The barns remained full, the fields maintained, but everything felt emptier, like the ranch itself had lost a heartbeat. He stopped riding the trails they used to explore together. He avoided the northern ridge entirely. And though he never admitted it aloud, he had dreams, strange ones, of Willow running through the fog, pausing as if trying to return but unable to cross some invisible boundary. Every time he called out to her, she disappeared into the mist. Then, one late summer evening nearly 8 years after she vanished, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in streaks of red and gold, the ranch's cattle began to act strangely. They shifted, restless, their ears twitching, their heads turning toward the distant tree line. The rancher stepped out onto the porch, leaning against the railing, squinting across the field. Something moved far out in the tall grass. Something graceful. Something familiar. He blinked. Then blinked again. A silhouette emerged, shimmering against the setting sun. A horse, no, not just any horse. Willow. The same silver coat. The same proud stance. The same gentle, cautious steps. His breath hitched, and for the first time in years his hands trembled not from age, but from shock. But then, he froze. Because Willow was not alone. A second figure stepped out of the tall grass behind her. Smaller, darker, moving with cautious but steady steps. A young foal. And suddenly, everything the rancher believed he knew about loss, about the wild, about survival, shattered. The rancher's heart pounded so violently he could feel each beat echoing in his chest. For a long moment, he wondered if his eyes were deceiving him, if age, exhaustion, or the low evening light was tricking his mind into seeing what it desperately longed for. But no, this wasn't a dream. Willow stood there in the open meadow, her silver coat glowing in the dying sunlight just as vividly as the day she disappeared. She looked older, yes, her muscles more defined, her stance wiser, but it was undeniably her. Yet his eyes kept drifting to the small shape beside her. A foal. A living, breathing, impossibly real foal. The rancher's breath caught in his throat. He gripped the porch railing, knuckles turning white. Willow had vanished into the wilderness 8 long years ago. 8 years. How could she have survived the predators, the harsh winters, the scarcity of food? And even more impossible, how could she have birthed and raised a foal out there, alone, without human care, far from any known herd? The foal nudged Willow's side gently, unsure whether to step forward. Willow glanced back at the little one, lifting her head with a calm reassurance only a mother could give. The gesture was tender, gentle. So familiar, so heartbreakingly similar to how she used to look at the rancher when she was still his. He took one step off the porch. Then another. His boots sank into the soft earth as he walked, each movement slow, cautious, as if approaching a fragile memory that might vanish at the slightest disturbance. "Willow," he whispered, his voice cracking. The mare's ears twitched. Her head turned. For a split second, everything froze, the air, the cattle, even the wind. Then, as though recognizing the voice that had raised her, Willow took a single step toward him. It felt like time bent around them, collapsing the years of absence into one trembling instant. But just as quickly as his heart surged with relief, fear crept in. The foal stepped out from behind Willow's front legs, revealing more of itself. Small, dark, and strong. Not silver like Willow. Not the color of any stallion he'd ever owned. This foal was wild-born. Its posture, its eyes, its wary steps told him everything. Willow hadn't just survived out there. She had lived. And she hadn't lived alone. The rancher stopped walking, his boots rooted to the ground. His mind spun with questions, ones that twisted between wonder and dread. Had Willow joined a wild herd? Had she been taken in by a lone Mustang stallion? Had she been running free all these years, building a life entirely separate from the ranch she'd once called home? He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. The world felt unreal, like a story someone else should be living, not him, a tired old man who thought life had already shown him all its surprises. Just then, Willow let out a soft, familiar whinny. One he hadn't heard in nearly a decade, yet instantly recognized. It was the same call she used to make whenever she returned from the lower pasture, searching for him. But now, the sound carried something new, something deeper. Maturity. Motherhood. Wildness. The foal pressed closer to her, still uncertain. The rancher crouched slowly, lowering himself to appear less intimidating. He extended a trembling hand toward Willow, not expecting her to come, but hoping for a miracle. "Girl, is it really you?" he whispered. Willow took another step forward. Her movements were cautious, but there was no fear in her eyes, only recognition and something like relief. She reached out with her nose, brushing his hand. The contact was electric, sending a wave of emotion up his arm and straight into his chest. He sucked in a breath as years of grief collapsed into a single moment of trembling joy. But even in the midst of that miracle, Willow suddenly shifted her stance protectively, placing herself subtly between him and the foal. The rancher froze again. Not because she feared him, her gentle nudge had proved otherwise, but because she was still a mother defending her young. The wild had changed her. Strengthened her. Taught her caution, instincts, and independence. Behind them, the cattle continued to murmur restlessly. The sky dimmed further. Crickets began to chatter in the tall grass. And the rancher understood something profound. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a return full of secrets. Secrets Willow had carried with her from the wilderness. Secrets that were now standing right in front of him, alive, breathing, and staring at him with dark, curious eyes. The rancher exhaled shakily. He knew this moment was only the beginning. The real story, the truth of where Willow had been and what she had survived, was still waiting to be uncovered. The rancher stayed perfectly still, letting the weight of the moment settle over him like a heavy blanket. Willow had returned, yes, But everything about her presence whispered a truth he wasn't yet ready to face. She was no longer the horse he had lost. She was a creature shaped by the wilderness itself, by storms and predators and long, unforgiving seasons. And the foal at her side, wide-eyed, uncertain, yet sturdy, was living proof that her story during those missing years was far deeper than a simple disappearance. He lowered his hand slowly as Willow stepped back, not out of fear, but out of quiet caution. Her eyes studied him with a blend of familiarity and something new, wisdom, perhaps. A silent understanding born from surviving the kind of life no domesticated horse was ever meant to endure. The rancher felt a sting behind his eyes. He clenched his jaw. He wouldn't cry, not yet. Instead, he sank to one knee in the field, his joints cracking under the movement. His back ached, his breathing came uneven, but he didn't care. He needed, to be at her level. To show he wasn't a threat. To let Willow choose the terms of their reunion. The mare flicked her tail, glanced once at the foal, then began walking toward him again. Each step was slow, measured, deliberate. The rancher noticed things he hadn't seen before, faint scars along her flank, a healed bite mark on her shoulder, the hardened definition of a horse who had run farther, fought harder, and survived more than any ranch animal ever should. She stopped just inches away from him. He raised a trembling hand, this time toward her cheek. Willow leaned in. Not in the eager, affectionate way she once had, but in a calm, respectful greeting. A yes, I remember you touch. His fingers brushed her warm coat. His breath shuddered. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Just a man who'd spent years grieving, and a mare who had lived an entire lifetime in those same years. Then a small sound broke the silence, a soft, high-pitched squeak. The foal. He opened his eyes and saw the little one standing just a few steps behind her, staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Its legs were thin but strong. Its mane was messy, wild, untouched by human hands. And its eyes, dark, deep, alert, seemed to shimmer with the untamed spirit of the wilderness. Hey there, little one, the rancher whispered, voice shaky. But the foal stepped back, pressing against Willow's side. Easy now, he murmured, keeping his voice soft. Willow turned her head slightly toward the foal, then toward him, as if asking him for patience. As if silently telling him, she's not ready. Not yet. The rancher understood. Trust wasn't built in a day. Certainly not with a foal that had only ever known the wild. He let out a slow breath and shifted his gaze back to Willow. I thought I lost you, he whispered. I searched till I couldn't search anymore. Willow blinked slowly, almost apologetically. She nudged his shoulder gently. A familiar gesture he hadn't felt in nearly a decade. And that was when he noticed something even more surprising. She wasn't just thinner or more muscular. She wasn't just scarred or hardened. She carried herself with the posture of a lead mare. Not a follower. Not a wanderer. A leader. Whatever life she had built out there, she had earned respect. The rancher's thoughts spiraled. Had Willow become part of a wild Mustang band? Had she bonded with a wild stallion? Had she raised more than one foal over the years? Were there others still out there, connected to her? He swallowed hard. The questions multiplied like wildfire. Just then, a rustling sound echoed from the tree line. Not loud, but enough to send a shiver up his spine. Willow's ears shot up. The foal stepped closer to her. The rancher slowly rose to his feet, turning his head toward the forest. For the first time since Willow emerged from the tall grass, he realized something. Her return might not have been a coincidence. Something, or someone, might have followed her. And the rancher's world was about to change far more than he ever imagined. The rancher's breath hitched as the rustling in the trees deepened, not violent, not rushed, but deliberate. Something was moving through the forest with purpose. Willow felt it before he did, her muscles tightened, her stance shifted, and her tail flicked in a nervous arc. The foal pressed so closely into her side that its tiny hooves nearly tangled beneath her legs. The rancher took an instinctive step back. A lifetime on the land had taught him to listen, really listen, when the wild went quiet. And now, all at once, the insects had stilled. The breeze vanished. Even the cattle stopped their restless murmuring. Something was watching them. Willow turned her head sharply toward the tree line, releasing a low, warning nicker. Not a frightened sound, no. It was protective. Territorial. A mother's call that said, "Stay back. They're mine." The rancher felt a chill crawl up the back of his neck. He squinted into the shadows, his heartbeat slow but heavy. At first, he saw nothing. Just darkness between the trunks. Just the dense outline of pines and cottonwoods. Then, he saw them. Eyes. Amber, steady, unblinking eyes. Low to the ground. Wide-set. Predatory. A cougar. The rancher's stomach dropped. Cougars were silent, patient killers. They could track their prey for miles, waiting for the perfect moment. But this one didn't attack. It didn't even move closer. Instead, it simply observed, its cold gaze focused not on the rancher, but on the foal. The rancher felt his throat tighten. 8 years in the wild meant Willow had survived things like this alone. She knew the rhythm of the hunt, the patterns of predators, the thin line between escape and death. The scars along her body suddenly made sense. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had come home, if only for a moment, with a young life depending on her. The rancher slowly reached for the old rifle hanging by the porch railing behind him. Not to harm the cougar unless absolutely necessary, but to show he was not defenseless. Before he could grab it, Willow stepped forward, placing herself squarely between the foal and the predator. Her ears pinned back. Her stance widened. She let out a sharp, piercing neigh that echoed across the field like a war cry. The cougar twitched. Then shifted its weight back. Not fleeing, but acknowledging. And finally, almost reluctantly, it faded back into the forest, silent as a shadow. The rancher's exhale trembled out of him. He wiped sweat from his brow, though the evening air had grown cool. For a long moment, neither he nor Willow moved. Only when the forest fully settled into stillness did the tension ease from her body. "Good girl," he whispered. But this time, the words felt insufficient, too small for the strength she had become. He walked slowly toward her again. Willow didn't step back. If anything, she looked relieved that the cougar had withdrawn. She lowered her head, breathing warm air against his chest in a gesture that felt like trust, deep, hard-earned trust. The rancher finally dared to reach toward the foal again, not to touch, but simply to show he meant no harm. The foal watched him with wide, blinking eyes, unsure but no longer trembling. Willow glanced at the foal, then at him, as if silently granting a small permission. He crouched down, his knees cracking. "Hey, little one," he murmured. "You're safe now. She kept you safe." But even as he spoke the words, a new realization washed over him, heavy, confusing, heart-wrenching. Willow coming back now wasn't random. She had returned at sunset, at feeding time, following old patterns she remembered. But the cougar following her trail meant something else entirely. She had brought danger with her. And the foal, inexperienced and vulnerable, was now exposed to threats the ranch was not prepared for. The rancher slowly stood again, mind racing. What if Willow was seeking help? What if something worse than predators was out there? What if her return wasn't just a reunion, but a warning? He swallowed hard, staring into the dimming meadow as the sky faded into deep twilight. Willow snorted softly, nudging the foal. The rancher felt a cold twist in his gut. Something was coming. And whatever story the wild had carved into Willow's life, it wasn't finished yet. The rancher stood in the cooling twilight, his pulse still steady but heavy from what he'd just witnessed. Willow had returned, yes, but she had returned changed, hardened, and carrying a warning written in every scar, every cautious glance, every instinctive movement. The foal pressed close to her, tiny body trembling, its breath sharp and shallow. The rancher's heart twisted at the sight. This little one had known nothing but wilderness, predators, and survival. It had never known the safety of a barn, the warmth of a stall, or the gentle rhythm of human care. But now, that small, fragile life was on his land. And whether he was ready for it or not, he was responsible. A cold breeze swept across the grasslands, carrying the scent of pine and something else, tension. Willow lifted her head, sniffing the air, then nudged the foal as if telling it to stay close. The rancher watched her carefully. Willow didn't act like a horse wandering home. She acted like a mare checking the perimeter. Assessing. Calculating. He knew that look. He'd seen it in herd leaders during storms, during coyote sightings, during sudden shifts in weather. She wasn't done protecting yet. The rancher stepped back slowly, keeping his voice soft. "It's all right, girl, you're home. You're safe here, both of you." But a painful truth slid into his chest as soon as he said it. He wasn't sure that was true. Something had driven Willow back after 8 long years. Something had pushed her out of the wild she had adapted to, mastered, even led within. A cougar alone wouldn't shake a mare like her, not one who had clearly survived many. No, something else was happening out there. Something bigger. He turned toward the barn, motioning gently with his hand. "Come on, girl. Let's get you somewhere warm." Willow hesitated. Not because she didn't trust him, but because the barn was confinement. Walls. Enclosure. A place where she couldn't see the horizon. Her eyes flicked toward the forest again. Her muscles tightened. She snorted sharply. The rancher paused. He could see the conflict in her, instinct versus memory, wild versus home. Then, with slow caution, Willow stepped forward. One step. Another. And the foal hurried beside her, uncertain but obedient. The rancher walked ahead of them, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't want to rush her, didn't want to make her feel trapped. If Willow was going to cross back into her old life, it had to be on her terms. As they approached the barn, the ranch's old dog, Rusty, hobbled out from behind a feeding trough. Blind in one eye, gray around the muzzle, but still protective of the property. The moment he saw Willow, he froze. His tail lifted, wagging weakly as recognition flickered in his cloudy eyes. "Easy, Rusty," the rancher murmured. Surprisingly, Willow didn't shy away. She lowered her head. Rusty sniffed her gently. 8 years had passed, but some bonds, even between animals, left a memory deeper than time. The foal, however, startled. It jumped back, tiny hooves skidding in the dirt. Rusty whimpered softly, backing away to show it meant no harm. "Shoo, it's okay," the rancher whispered. He placed a hand on the barn door and pushed it open. Warm light spilled out. The smell of hay and cedar shavings drifted into the open air. Willow stepped halfway in, then suddenly froze again. Her ears shot forward. Her nostrils flared. She turned sharply toward the northern hills. The rancher followed her gaze. In the dim fading light, something moved. A shape. A shadow. Distant, but unmistakable. A horse. No, larger. Broader. Wild. A stallion. The rancher's breath thinned. The stallion stood at the crest of the ridge, head lowered, mane blowing in the wind. He didn't come closer. He didn't challenge. He simply watched Willow, and the foal, and the rancher. Like he was deciding something. Like he was measuring the rancher as a threat, or as an ally. Willow let out a low, haunting sound, not fear, not anger, but something bittersweet. A goodbye? A warning? The rancher couldn't tell. The foal pressed against her legs again, trembling. And then, just as silently as he had appeared, the stallion turned, disappearing back over the ridge and into the wild. The rancher felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Now everything made sense. Willow hadn't simply wandered back home. She had been sent back. Or driven back. Or forced to choose between her wild family and saving her foal. The rancher stepped forward gently. "Come inside, girl. Whatever's out there, we'll face it together." For the first time, Willow fully crossed the threshold of the barn. The foal followed. And the rancher knew, this was no longer just a reunion. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous, and far more extraordinary. The barn door creaked softly as it closed behind them, sealing Willow and her foal inside the warm glow of the lantern light. The rancher fastened the latch gently, not wanting to startle either of them. The mare paced in a slow circle, her hooves brushing the straw, anxious but not panicked. The foal stuck close to her flank, trembling less than before but still watching every flicker of shadow. The rancher stood quietly by the doorway, giving them space. For the first time since Willow had appeared in the meadow, he finally allowed himself to truly breathe. She was home. The foal was safe. At least for now. But the image of the stallion standing on the ridge burned in his mind like a brand. Powerful. Silent. Watching. A guardian, or a threat. The wild had rules he could never fully understand. Willow stopped pacing. She lifted her head, ears perked sharply, not toward the door, not toward the outside world, but toward the rancher himself. Her gaze softened. It wasn't the wary, hardened stare of a survivor anymore. It was something familiar. Something old. Something that had survived 8 long years in a corner of her heart untouched by wilderness. He stepped closer, slowly, the way he used to when she was a young mare. Willow didn't move away. Instead, she released a soft breath and leaned her forehead gently into his chest. The rancher closed his eyes. Emotion trembled through him. Years of grief, guilt, longing, and hope collapsing into this one fragile moment. "You made it back, girl. You really made it back." But as he whispered the words, he felt Willow's body shift, not in fear, but in exhaustion. She was worn down. Not from the journey home, but from something deeper, heavier. Something that had happened out there before she returned. He placed a gentle hand along her shoulder and felt another scar beneath her coat. Not a predator's bite. Not a branch. Something different. Something deliberate. A rope burn. The rancher's stomach twisted. This wasn't just the work of predators or storms. Someone had tried to take her. Someone had tried to capture her. Someone had tried to keep her. He knelt down and checked the foal next, careful not to touch, only to observe. On its hind leg, faint but visible, was a thin scrape in the shape of a wire. The truth crashed into him, Willow hadn't just escaped the wild. She had escaped humans. He stood abruptly, heart pounding with a new kind of fear. "Who the hell was out there with you?" he whispered. Willow lifted her head, eyes dark, deep, and filled with stories she could never tell. A sudden sound outside snapped the moment in two, hoofbeats. Fast. Heavy. Not one. Multiple. The rancher ran to the barn window and looked out. Shapes moved along the ridge. Not predators. Not mustangs. Horses with riders. 3 of them. They stopped at the edge of his property, shadowed by the moonlight. One of the riders stood tall in his saddle, scanning the fields the way a hunter scans for prey. The rancher's blood ran cold. These were the ones Willow fled from. Humans who were never meant to follow her here. He turned to Willow, whose muscles tensed instantly. She remembered them. She feared them. But she stood between the foal and the door, ready to fight to protect her child. The rancher grabbed his rifle. Not to kill. But to defend what was his. What had come back to him. The hoofbeats grew louder, the riders approaching slowly, testing boundaries. The rancher stepped outside, standing firm on his porch like he had countless times before, But this time his heart hammered with a fire he hadn't felt in years. "This land is mine," he called out. "Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it here." Silence. Then one of the riders urged his horse forward. "An escaped mare," the man said coldly. "And a foal. They belong to us." "No," the rancher said, voice steady. "She belongs to no one now." Another rider scoffed. "She was in our trap. That makes her ours." The rancher stepped closer. "She got away. That makes her free." The leader stared at him, calculating. Then, slowly, he pulled on his reins. "This isn't over," the man warned. The riders turned, disappearing back into the tree line. The rancher didn't lower his rifle until the night swallowed them completely. He walked back to the barn, heart still pounding. Willow stared at him, waiting. "It's all right, girl," he whispered. "I won't let anyone take you." "Not again." Willow let out a deep, relieved breath and rested her head against his shoulder once more. The foal stepped forward slightly, its first small gesture of trust. The rancher felt his heart swell. This wasn't the end of the story. Not by far. But it was the beginning of something new, a promise. A family rebuilt. A battle worth fighting. And a bond between man, mare, and foal that not even 8 years of wilderness could break. As the lantern flickered, casting warm light across the barn, the rancher knew one truth with absolute certainty: Willow had come home for a reason. And whatever came next, they would face it together.